It was a cold, wet Tuesday when archivist and crash investigator Margot Ellison received a brown envelope marked Evidence Vault Release, Subject Flight A417. She hadn't heard that flight number in over a decade. Flight A417 was the domestic flight that crashed over the Shenandoah Valley in 2010. 38 dead, no survivors. Cause: mechanical failure as declared in the official NTSB report. The case had been archived, reviewed, and forgotten. Until now. Inside the envelope was a small bundle of personal effects recently recovered from a long-forgotten storage container at Dulles Airport. Items never claimed, never catalogued. Among them, a leather wallet, a crushed watch, and a folded, yellowed envelope sealed with wax. It was addressed in spidery handwriting, to be opened only in the event of my death. Monsieur Holbrook. Margot's hands froze. She had read that name before. Michael Holbrook, a former whistleblower and federal witness tied to the 2006 Delva Pharmaceuticals investigation. He had disappeared from public record after testifying behind closed doors. The same man who, 4 years later, boarded Flight A417 under an assumed name. He wasn't just a random passenger. He was in hiding. She carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a 6-page handwritten letter. It began, "If you're reading this, then I'm gone. But what I know shouldn't die with me." What followed was an account unlike anything Margot had ever read in her years of investigating crashes. Holbrook claimed he had evidence that Flight A417 was never meant to land, that it was part of a quiet, systemic effort to eliminate compromised federal assets. He wrote, "They told me it was safe to fly, that I'd be debriefed on arrival. I told them I'd mailed a copy of everything I knew to a journalist in New York. I hadn't. Not yet. But it was the only insurance I had." The letter named individuals, agents, attorneys, even one sitting senator, who allegedly knew about an undisclosed program targeting protected witnesses, a program called Operation Eraser. Margot sat back, stunned. "Do you believe stories can change reality?" Comment: "I believe the letter, if this one will stay with you, and subscribe to the story Beyond the Impact, because the next truth might already be buried." If any of this was true, Flight A417 wasn't an accident, it was an execution. Margot didn't sleep that night. She contacted a colleague, Isaac Monroe, a retired NTSB technician who had originally worked on the A417 case. When she mentioned Holbrook's name, there was a long pause. "You weren't supposed to see that letter," he said quietly. "Then why was it in the release envelope?" she asked. "Because someone wants it seen, just not traced." Margot dug up the original passenger manifest. She compared it to Holbrook's real name, no match, but when she cross-referenced his alias, Eric Doyle, she found it. Seat 14C. She reviewed the seating chart. 14A and 14B were occupied by a young couple returning from a wedding. 14D and 14E were empty, but 14F? That seat was redacted in the original report, unusual, unless the occupant was classified. Margot filed a FOIA request to access the full, unredacted manifest. Denied. National security exception. That was when she knew Holbrook had told the truth. She visited the NTSB archive in person, flashing her clearance badge. There, tucked in the original evidence box for seat row 14, she found a single item that had never been included in the digital records. A photograph. It showed Holbrook, clearly visible boarding the plane, being led by 2 men in dark coats. Not flight crew, no IDs visible. Margot zoomed in on one of the men's faces. She recognized him. Years ago, she had seen that face in a leaked DHS file during a parallel investigation. He was rumored to be an intelligence cleaner, someone who removes witnesses, not protects them. Why would someone like that be escorting a man like Holbrook, unless Holbrook never intended to reach his destination alive? What would you do if a dead man's letter contradicted the government's truth? Comment: I'd read the next page. if you're ready to uncover what they buried with Flight A417. And don't forget to subscribe to The Story Beyond the Impact. This conspiracy has just begun. Margot took the photo to a former intelligence analyst named Leon Harper, someone she'd trusted during past whistleblower investigations. When he saw the cleaner's face, he didn't hesitate. That's Roland Mathers. If he was on that flight, it wasn't to protect Halbrook. Mathers was suspected to be part of an unofficial subunit of Homeland Security known as Section 17, rumored to operate beyond traditional oversight. Its agents were ghost operatives, unacknowledged by any branch, used when plausible deniability was a priority. Margot turned back to the photo. Halbrook looked calm, almost resigned, like he knew. She asked Harper what happened to Section 17. Technically disbanded in 2009, but that's just paperwork. Rumor was they rebranded under a private defense contractor, one with aviation clearance. Margot's heart sank. She went back into the A417 crash report, paying close attention to the final cockpit voice recordings. The official transcript had ended with a routine mechanical alert and a vague distress signal. But something felt off. She acquired the raw CVR audio, difficult to get, but not impossible for someone with her clearance. In the last 10 seconds before the aircraft broke apart, there was a third voice, not the pilot, not the co-pilot. Male, calm, unregistered. It's done. Pull them now, then static. The voice was not addressed in any version of the report. Margot ran the audio through voice print analysis. It matched Roland Mathers. He wasn't just escorting Halbrook, he was in the cockpit, issuing a command. Margot began reviewing the flight's black box data. Speed, altitude, descent rate. Everything about Flight A417 had been chalked up to a catastrophic hydraulic failure, except the flight path had changed mid-air. 30 minutes before the crash, the plane had deviated from its approved course, subtly at first, but it eventually drifted more than 70 nautical miles west, toward a remote stretch of the Shenandoah Range, with limited radar coverage. She cross-checked FAA records for course correction notices. There were none. Air traffic control had never instructed the diversion. The change had originated from inside the aircraft. She dug deeper. The flight computer had received a manual input code, not from the cockpit, but from the auxiliary navigation system, a backup panel typically unused in commercial flights. That code wasn't normal. It was a military override code. She called Isaac Monroe again. "Do you know what an N-17 redirect protocol is?" she asked. Silence. "Then where did you find that?" "Flight A417 logged it 33 minutes before descent." Another long pause. "That code isn't supposed to exist anymore. It was part of an override system used during 9/11 in case aircraft had to be force-landed by remote." "Are you saying someone took control of the plane from outside?" "Not just someone. Someone with defense-level clearance." Margot returned to Halbrook's letter. One sentence stood out now more than ever. "I don't care what they threaten. This letter is my black box. If the plane doesn't make it, follow the noise." She played the CVR again. 10 seconds of static. She amplified the background noise. Buried beneath the static was the sound of typing. Someone had accessed the aircraft systems during the crash. Someone wanted to send a final message, and Margot was now its only reader. The more Margot studied Halbrook's letter, the more one phrase began to haunt her. "I told them I'd mailed a copy of everything I knew to a journalist in New York." Was it a bluff, or did Halbrook really attempt to leak his information before boarding Flight A417? She searched for journalist deaths, disappearances, or resignations around May 2010, the time of the crash. A name surfaced. Adrienne Voss, a young investigative reporter for the New York Courier, known for chasing pharmaceutical corruption cases. She had gone on indefinite leave 2 weeks after the crash. No articles published since, no statements, just silence. Margot tracked down her last known address. It had been scrubbed from all active databases, but an archived leasing form in a forgotten housing database still showed her former apartment in Queens. Margot went in person. What she found chilled her. The apartment was empty, unoccupied for years, yet the mailbox still bore the faded name A. Voss. She knocked on neighbors' doors. One elderly tenant remembered her. She was quiet, real focused. Then one night she came home shaking, threw out boxes of notes. Next morning she was gone. Movers cleared the place, said she'd been reassigned abroad. But Adrienne Voss had never worked abroad. Margot filed a records request for Adrienne's passport activity. No international departure. No flights, no customs. It was as if Adrienne had been erased. She remembered what Halbrook had called the program, Operation Eraser. Margot returned to her car, flipped through the scanned copy of Halbrook's letter, and noticed a strange indentation on the final page. A pressure mark, as if something had been clipped to it. She looked closer. It wasn't random. It matched the outline of a press badge. Adrienne's press badge. Meaning Halbrook had met her. Meaning she had seen the letter. And now she was gone, haunted by the redacted seat in the manifest, 14F. Margot turned her attention to the flight's boarding records. While seat 14F had been marked empty, surveillance footage from the boarding gate told a different story. Frame by frame, she watched passengers step through the jetway. The timestamp reached 9:46 a.m. And then a man in a navy coat, wearing no visible identification, holding no boarding pass, entered through a separate access point near the cockpit. No one stopped him. No one looked at him twice. She enhanced the frame. The image was blurry, distorted by motion blur. But facial mapping revealed a 64% match to a known intelligence contractor who had also been linked to the early drafts of Operation Eraser. Name, Nathan Graves. Margot compared timestamps. If Halbrook was in 14C and Roland Mathers sat behind him, then Graves might have taken 14F. Why? Because 14F wasn't a seat, it was a control station. She reviewed the black box data again. There had been 2 active logins to the aircraft's auxiliary systems, one from the cockpit's co-pilot terminal, the other from mid-cabin panel access. A hidden service port behind seats 14E, 14F, used only by certified technicians. Graves had boarded without registering. He'd sat in the unlisted seat. He'd accessed the plane's systems mid-air, and right before the final descent, his login vanished, erased from the onboard logs. Just like Adrienne, just like the truth. Margot now had enough to go public, but the moment she opened her secure drive to upload the files to a cloud server, she noticed something strange. Files were already being copied. She pulled her laptop offline, checked her ports. Someone had remotely accessed her system. She wasn't chasing ghosts anymore. They were watching her. Margot didn't go home that night. She knew her system had been accessed remotely. Her firewall log showed the IP address pinged from an offshore server registered to a shell company in the Cayman Islands, a company that also appeared in a previous investigation into contract bidding by Delva Pharmaceuticals. The connection was undeniable. Halbrook had testified against Delva. Adrienne had covered the story. Flight A417 was the thread that had unraveled it all. Margot took the hard drive and fled to a secure location, a university lab once used for encrypted intelligence analysis. The access badge still worked. There, she discovered something hidden inside the raw crash data logs, a packet of code embedded within the final 10 seconds of the cockpit voice recording, disguised as a redundancy command. It contained a message, just one line. If the plane lands, none of this matters. It was dated 2 hours before the crash. Preloaded. That meant the crash had been scripted, engineered not as a malfunction, but as a sequence, a plan. She suddenly remembered Halbrook's line again. I told them I'd sent the files. That was a lie. But they didn't know that. What if that lie wasn't enough? What if someone on the flight found out he was bluffing? And what if that someone had authorization to execute a controlled crash? She pulled Halbrook's autopsy report. Cause of death: multiple blunt force trauma consistent with high-speed impact, but the toxicology panel? It was missing. She requested a sealed version using her clearance. When it arrived, her stomach turned. Halbrook had been sedated before the crash. He never felt it. He was neutralized before the impact, which meant someone on board wanted him silent before the rest of the passengers died. And they had succeeded. In a secure archive in Washington, Margot uncovered a document that wasn't supposed to exist. A Senate Intelligence Committee report draft, dated 3 months before Flight A417. The document referenced non-standard aviation events and targeted decommissioning of high-risk assets en route. She scanned the signatories. One name stood out: Senator Everett Langford, a rising political figure at the time of the crash. Pro-defense, pro-surveillance, but most importantly, on the board of Delva's Ethics Oversight Panel until 2008, just before Halbrook's testimony. She needed more. She flew to D.C., attended a public fundraiser where Langford would be speaking, and waited until the senator stepped out into a private corridor flanked by security. Margot approached. One of the guards stepped forward. Langford noticed her badge. "Ellison, right? You've been digging. Did you authorize Operation Eraser?" Langford gave a soft chuckle. "You think a senator signs off on something like that in writing? You signed a draft acknowledging preemptive containment of witnesses." He stepped closer. "Listen carefully. Some people die for justice. Others die to prevent collapse. Halbrook wasn't a martyr. He was a fuse. We cut the wire before it exploded. So you admit?" "I don't admit. I inform. Because now that you've come this far, your options are limited." His tone wasn't threatening. It was procedural. "The way you explain something already decided. You have one chance," he said, "to become part of the silence, or die screaming into it." Margot left, shaken, but more determined than ever. She pulled the recorder from her pocket. It had captured every word. She now had a U.S. senator on tape admitting to knowing about the operation. She no longer needed to convince herself this was real. She needed to make the world hear it. Margot uploaded the audio file, the senator's confession, to 5 encrypted storage locations across 3 continents. She created scheduled releases, time-locked to go public if she failed to cancel them every 24 hours. This wasn't paranoia anymore. It was protocol. But less than an hour later, one of her backup servers pinged her with an alert. "File corrupted." She checked another. Missing. Only 2 remained secure. Whoever was inside her system had already found 3 of her hiding places. This wasn't just someone inside the government. It was someone with the kind of reach only whispered about in whistleblower forums. A program known simply as Lacuna. She had seen it referenced before, in old case files connected to intelligence contractors and Black Ops psychological units. Lacuna didn't destroy truth. It erased memory of it. She began to experience it firsthand. Her phone's GPS showed a route she hadn't taken. Her bank records listed withdrawals she never made. Her access badge was flagged as expired, even though it had 2 years left. They weren't just erasing the story, they were erasing her. She rushed to one of the last physical copies of the cockpit audio, hidden in a safety deposit box. But when she arrived at the bank and presented her credentials, the teller returned with a blank face. "There's no box registered under your name." She showed them the signed receipt. The manager confirmed the signature, but claimed it wasn't in their system. She was vanishing. Piece by piece. She took out Halbrook's letter again. On the last page, in barely legible ink, was a line she hadn't noticed before. "They'll take your name before they take your life." Margot needed a crack, a glitch in their system of silence. She returned to the manifest of Flight A417. She studied every passenger name, every occupation, every destination. That's when she saw it. Row 27A, Ethan Keller, age 9, accompanied by Dr. Alicia Keller, child psychologist, heading to Denver for a conference. The child had not been referenced in any of the crash summaries, tributes, or family settlements. No photos, no public statements, no memorial entry, just a name, one that had been lost in the larger narrative of victims. She found Dr. Keller's name in a survivor's family support database, but her contact information had been wiped, so she searched for Ethan's school district, found an old newsletter mentioning Ethan's name in a chess tournament, dated 3 weeks after the crash. She traced the photo back to a server. In the image, a boy smiling. The same name, same age, but one glaring inconsistency. He was supposed to be dead. Margot tracked down the school. The principal refused to confirm his enrollment. Margot pushed harder, called the school nurse pretending to be an old family friend. That's when the nurse said, "Ethan doesn't come here anymore." After the relocation, the mother said it was better to keep his name quiet. Relocation? Margot asked. Something about a special witness protection unit, government approved. They said it involved a plane crash, but we weren't allowed to ask questions. Ethan Keller had survived, and he had been extracted, silently, without media, without mention, which meant someone had pulled him from the wreckage before the public ever knew. Why? And more importantly, what did Ethan see that night? Margot found her lead through a fluke. A message board for parents of gifted children had a cryptic post from a user named Shadow Chess 27A. The title read, "Can you forget something you never knew happened?" She reached out. 3 hours later, she received a reply. "I don't remember the crash, but I remember the smell of the seatbelt. I remember a man crying behind me. I remember a voice in my ear telling me to sleep." It was signed simply, Ethan. Margot replied, cautiously. She didn't say who she was, just asked if he'd ever spoken to a doctor about his memories. "They told me my dreams were metaphors, but they always end with a flash of light and then nothing. Just silence. I think they put something in my mind to erase it." Margot asked to speak to his mother. No reply for hours. Then came a video file. It was grainy, low resolution, recorded secretly. A woman sat in a nondescript office, her face gaunt, nervous. Across from her, a suited man whose face was pixelated by the poor camera angle, but the audio was clear. "Dr. Keller, your son was not supposed to survive. He was not supposed to see what he saw. He was just a boy. He doesn't even remember. Memory is not the problem. Witness status is. I won't let you take him. You already did, the moment he stepped on that flight." The video cut off. Margot stared at the screen. They didn't want Ethan dead. They wanted him invisible. She followed up with Ethan again, this time revealing her identity. That's when he told her the truth. "They told me if I ever spoke about the man in the black coat, they'd say I made it all up. But I didn't. I saw him. He put something in the pilot's drink. Then he walked back and smiled at me like nothing happened." Margot realized something chilling. This wasn't the first time an accident had been used to erase someone. It was a pattern. She pulled data from FAA archives, scouring crash investigations with vague conclusions. She noticed 4 crashes in the past 15 years with similar traits. Unusual manifest inconsistencies. 1 or more seats left blank or unregistered. Black boxes missing final seconds of recording. 1 survivor or witness later relocated. She cross-referenced names, companies, and recovery crews. 1 name appeared in all 4 cases. A logistics company contracted during recovery, Braylock Solutions. Margot dug deeper. Braylock was registered as a transportation safety consultancy, but its ownership traced back to a blind trust connected to Delva Pharmaceuticals. They weren't just silencing whistleblowers. They were creating the events to justify it, manufacturing crashes, crafting the narrative, erasing the bodies. Flight A417 had been the template. Ethan had broken the loop. Halbrook's letter had left a crack, and Margot? She was about to shatter it. She scheduled the leak, The senator's confession, the cockpit audio, Halbrook's letter, Ethan's video testimony, everything. But just before she hit release, her screen went black. A new message appeared. There is no crash. There never was. You are dreaming, Margot. Wake up. Then it all vanished. After the system wipe, Margot retreated to the one place no signal could reach. A clean room bunker deep beneath an abandoned NSA training facility in West Virginia. She had helped build it during her early days in classified records protection, a failsafe for compromised digital assets. Here she booted a cold storage drive containing a mirror image of the deleted files, a backup she hadn't accessed in years. The files were intact, Halbrook's voice, Ethan's memories, the confession, but they felt different now. As if they no longer existed in the world above, as if she had crossed into a place outside the timeline they came from. Margot initiated the upload. One by one, the files began to push through secure relays. Then, error. Destination unknown. Recipient node has been sunset. Every platform she had used, encrypted networks, whistleblower drops, backdoor servers, had been shut down. Not offline, not banned. Sunset. It was a term used by intelligence to signify reality deletion. She paced the room. They're not just erasing data, she whispered. They're erasing the channels that remember it ever existed. She checked her own ID in the government registry. Margot Ellison, no match found. Then a flicker. A file had uploaded. Ethan's video testimony. Somehow it had gotten through. Then a text appeared on the clean room monitor. No sender. One truth is enough to fracture the silence, but only if it's believed. She stared at the screen. If this was the end, if this was her last message to the world, she had to make it count. She composed a final upload, a video of her holding the letter, reciting it word for word, naming every agent, every cover-up, every erased fact. As she recorded, tears ran down her face, not from fear, from clarity. She no longer needed to prove the crash was real. She needed to prove that memory itself could resist deletion. Margot released the final message. And then she waited. The next morning, she was still alive. No agents, no black vans, no digital silence. Instead, her burner phone lit up. Hundreds of messages, strangers from around the world writing, "I remember this crash. My uncle was on that flight. Why did I forget this story existed?" She had done it. She hadn't convinced the world. She had triggered buried memories. Because memory is not stored only in the brain. It echoes in paper, in sound, in fear, in stories that refuse to die. One message stood out. "My father worked recovery on A417. He said they pulled a man from 14C. Still breathing, but he wasn't on the final list. I think they kept him." Margot stared at that line. Halbrook. Could he have survived? Was his letter a post-mortem confession or a distraction? She went back to the letter, reread the last line, then saw something she hadn't noticed. Invisible ink. Faint. Only under specific UV light. I left another page. Coordinates followed. Deep in a government holding facility. Shut down in 2013. No longer monitored. Margot drove there. Broke in. The cell was small, cold, but there was a box. Inside, a photo of Halbrook, alive, dated 2014, and below it, a note. "If you're reading this, then memory still matters." She didn't cry. She smiled, because truth hadn't died in the crash. It had just been waiting for someone to remember. The holding facility was cold, not just physically, historically. It felt like time had stopped inside. Rusted gates, paper logs with no ink, cameras facing blank walls. But the box Margot had found, the one with Halbrook's picture, contained something else. A cassette recorder. Analog. Untouched. She pressed play. Halbrook's voice crackled to life. "If you're hearing this, then they haven't erased you yet. Good. That means memory is stronger than I feared. I was never the only one. I was one of 5. He named them. Whistleblowers, agents, witnesses, all targeted by Operation Eraser. They silenced the rest. Me, they tried to use as bait. But what they didn't count on was the fear of losing my own mind. That fear made me document everything. Not digitally, physically, on tape, in letters, on my skin. Margot noticed a code tattooed faintly on the bottom of the photo, a microprint QR code. She scanned it, a file downloaded, encrypted. But the password was embedded in the last sentence of Holbrook's tape. The truth isn't hidden in systems, it's hidden in stories. She tried variations, then typed Thestry Beyond, the Impact. The file opened. Inside, a complete dossier on Operation Eraser, dates, authorizations, locations of deleted archives, victims, surviving family members who were paid into silence, names of agents still active. She had enough now to go public with full immunity, not speculation, not theory, but documented irrefutable truth. But she paused, because the last page of the file was not official. It was a handwritten note, addressed to her. Margot, they'll try to discredit you, not with denial, but with belief. They'll flood the world with so many versions of the truth that no one will know what to hold on to. That's how silence wins, not by hiding the truth, but by making it impossible to find the real one. So tell the story, all of it, and let it tell itself. She did. She published the files. She aired Holbrook's tapes. She released Ethan's testimony. Some believed, others called it fiction. Most didn't know what to think. But a month later, a congressional subcommittee opened an inquiry into a defense contractor named Braylock Solutions. 2 senators resigned. 3 former DHS operatives disappeared. And 1 letter, just one, was placed in the Smithsonian Archives labeled Evidence of Cognitive Suppression via Aviation Control Systems 2010. Subject, Flight A417. Status, believed real. Do you believe stories can change reality? Comment, I believe the letter, if this one will stay with you. And subscribe to The Story Beyond the Impact, because the next truth might already be buried.